This is the SAU Report, a program featuring interviews with the faculty, staff, students, and alumni of Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.
Welcome to this special Campaign 98 edition of the SAU Report. I'm Lisa Stegall.
And I'm Amanda Black. With us today is a very special guest, Democratic candidate for Attorney General Mark Pryor. Mark Pryor is a former state representative and is in private law practice. He ran unsuccessfully in 1994 for Attorney General, but comes to join us today in his second bid for the office. Welcome, Mr. Pryor, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We mentioned that you did run once before for this office, and maybe if you could go over some of the things that you've learned and why you're back in the race again.
Well, one thing I learned is that Arkansas is a big, diverse state. It's a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to campaign. What I want to try to do in this campaign is take my campaign to the people of the state and talk to them, and I'm a little bit old-fashioned in this sense. I'm trying to get out and win this election one vote at a time. So what I'm trying to do is get out and talk to people, but maybe more importantly, listen to people and find out what they want their Attorney General to do, what they want their state government to do, and trying to find out how I can best serve them.
What exactly does the Attorney General do?
The Attorney General's office is very complicated. It does a lot of different things, and let me just, if I may have a moment, let me explain that to your viewing audience. On the one hand, it's a nuts and bolts, good government type office. The Attorney General represents all the state agencies, boards, and commissions. It handles any litigation that the state is involved in. Anytime the state is sued, the Attorney General is there to step in. The Attorney General advises the legislature and the governor on what the legal issues are facing the state. Not so much the political or the policy issues, but the legal issues. And it also has the function of being in charge of the Freedom of Information Act to make sure it's implemented in Arkansas like it should be. So on the one hand, it's a very nuts and bolts, good government office that promotes good, clean, open, honest government. On the other hand, it's an office that helps people. It's an office that has a very large consumer protection division. A lot of your viewers probably read in their weekly papers the columns written by our Attorney General to advise people about scams and rip-offs that are going on around the state and things to be concerned about. It's an office that is out there fighting for safe streets and safe schools and to protect crime victims, the rights of crime victims. It's also an office that should promote a sound and sensible environmental policy so the people in Arkansas can enjoy the natural resources in our state. It's an office that's out there fighting for lower or more fair utility rates. So it's an office on the one hand that really helps people, and it's also an office that is a good government type office.
I'm familiar with one aspect of the Attorney General's office where perhaps a quorum court or someone in state government needs an opinion, and the Attorney General's office often renders those opinions. Sometimes it takes, on average, from some of the instances I'm familiar with, about 90 days. Is that too long to wait for those opinions?
What I want to try to do with the opinions section, which is a very important function of the office, the Attorney General can offer his opinion and make his opinion available to elected officials around the state. However, bear in mind that the opinion is not legally binding. It's not like going to court and getting a ruling, but it's the Attorney General's best judgment on what the law is. What I want to try to do is have a much quicker turnaround time for the opinion function of the office. One complaint I hear about the office is not that the opinions are bad or inaccurate, it's just that the turnaround time is too slow. And I think that we can accomplish that without adding any staff or adding any budget. I think all we need to do is just move that to a higher priority to get those turned around in time. Because as a rule, when people ask a legal opinion, they need an answer. They don't need to wait 30, 60, or 90 days.
I see. Would you continue using any of the policies that Winston Bryant started?
I think so. You know, Winston Bryant, when you look at his office, I'd say there's probably two things he's probably best known for. One is consumer protection. Now, he did not create the Consumer Protection Division, but for 8 years, his Consumer Protection Division has really been stellar, not just here in Arkansas, but really nationwide. He has a very good Consumer Protection Division. Of course, I want to continue that. The other thing I think that Winston Bryant will probably go down in history as being known for is his youth suicide prevention. He has been very active on that issue when he was lieutenant governor, and he's now carried that into the Attorney General's office. And of course, I want to continue that function. And I'd say maybe a third area is the area of crime victims' rights. The Crime Victims Reparation Board is really staffed and really kind of functions out of the Attorney General's office, and it's another important thing that Winston has been innovative there, and I want to carry on all those things.
Are there some things that you're taking away?
Well, I think the office, as it presently is structured, is plenty big enough. There's 55 lawyers in that office. That makes it the third largest law office in Arkansas. 55 lawyers, that's a lot. And also there's an additional staff of maybe 60 or 70 other staff people that are not lawyers. I think what I'd like to try to do is not really take away anything from the office, but just try to make the office run better, make it more effective with the dollars it has, with the people it has. The office is full of great people that are very knowledgeable in what they do. And I think I can come in with some strong management, lead that office, do everything I can do to make sure that we're really getting the job done and stretch those tax dollars and really get the job done. My background kind of prepares me for that. When I'm in private practice in Little Rock right now, I've been in private practice for about 10 years. For about 8 of those years, I was at Wright, Lindsay & Jennings, which is a large Little Rock law firm. In fact, the Wright firm has 60 lawyers. AG's office has 55 lawyers, so they're almost identical size. I'm comfortable with a large law office environment. I know what it takes to manage the office. I know the challenges involved in keeping the office moving forward, so that's what I want to try to do.
One of the things that people in politics are really watching this race because it could possibly affect reapportionment. And that occurs in the state every 10 years. It's that time again. I was wondering if you could address how this race could affect reapportionment, what that's going to do, and how you see that vision coming to pass. Sure,
that's a great question. A lot of average citizens don't understand the reapportionment process. We have a kind of a unique process here in Arkansas. Under our Constitution, the governor, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of State every year after the census, so in our case in the year 2001, those 3 office holders sit down, look at all the numbers, and they divide up the state in 100 House districts and in 35 Senate districts for the state legislature. And my commitment there is to be fair, to follow the law and do what's right, not let partisan politics enter into it or not let politics enter into it, to follow the law and do what's right. I know that's particularly important in some counties. As an example, Columbia County here in South Arkansas. Columbia County is one of those counties that in the 1991 redistricting, 10 years ago, it was chopped up. I think I've forgotten the numbers, I think they have 5 different state reps and 3 different senators or something along those lines here in this one county. And the problem is that Columbia County feels like it's disenfranchised because there's no one representative or senator has a majority of their district here in Columbia County. So what I want to try to do is look at that map. I can't make any commitments on it because I don't know what the numbers are, but I just want to look at that map and do what's fair and make sure that the people get to have an active voice in government.
Are there any services you would like to see added to the outreach program?
Well, the outreach program is a great program. A lot of your viewers probably don't even know about it. It doesn't ever get any publicity, but in the outreach division, what they do in the Attorney General's office is they go out to schools and they try to encourage high school, junior high school students to stay off drugs, stay out of gangs, stay out of the juvenile court system, stay in school, graduate, go on to college. They try to enforce a positive role model, positive picture for them. In fact, after the Jonesboro shootings several weeks ago, the outreach division went up there, and they brought in counselors, not just from around the state, but from around really the nation, to counsel with the parents and the other students and the teachers and the school board to really help them cope with what they'd witnessed and what that community had gone through. In addition, the Attorney General's office sent up their experts in the law in areas like juvenile law to make sure the juvenile judge and the the prosecuting attorney got it right up there. So, so anyway, the outreach division is something that I certainly want to try to keep going. Unfortunately, in 1999, I believe it is, the grant money will cease to be coming in to fund outreach. So we're either going to have to find another revenue source or maybe even get some state dollars to fund that program.
I see. What about older programs? Are there anything you'd like to overhaul in any way?
Well, I think what I'd like to do in terms of an overhaul, I'd like to do a general overhaul of the office, and that doesn't mean to, get rid of everybody. That just means to kind of retool it, re-equip it, not just with computers and staff. I mean, they need help there. They're about 5 or 10 years behind on their computer system there. But what I'd like to see them do, or I'd like to see the office do, is just run better, run more like a private sector law office. There's a lot of things that I can do there that are kind of practical nuts and bolts things that may not win a lot of votes out there, but things that can make that office run better and make us, like I said, stretch those tax dollars and make the programs and things we do out of the office more effective.
As a lawyer, you focus primarily on civil litigation, workers' compensation. Do you feel that there might be any difficulties that you could face in possible appeals in criminal cases, things like that?
No, I've handled a lot of appeals in my law practice, and the office, the Attorney General's office, about 90% of its caseload is civil in nature. In other words, it is true that the Attorney General's office represents, say, the Department of Corrections and the State Police and the Crime Lab, but all those things it represents in a civil capacity. It is true that the Attorney General's office handles about 400 to 500 criminal appeals cases every year. I mean, that's an important part of what it does. It also handles about 400 to 500 civil rights actions every year. Normally those are against the Department of Corrections, but they can be against other agencies. So it's very important that I think that we have an Attorney General who's versed in civil law and appellate law, which I am, and I don't think we're going to have any problem making our deadlines and getting the things done we need to do.
I know courts are really backed up these days. Is there anything or any way that you would make the flow easier?
That's a great question, because in a sense the Attorney General doesn't have anything to do with the court system, but in another sense the Attorney General should be the leader for our whole judicial system. Of course, he's the state's lawyer. He should be there to help our state justice system work better. In fact, in Arkansas, we do have some courts that are backlogged and some problems in dockets around the state, but as a rule, Arkansas fares pretty well against the national average and what other states are doing in their court system. I think that when I was in the legislature, we always looked for areas that had a high number of cases with a small number of judges, and we assume that the more judges you put in, the quicker the cases go through. And I think that it's not true in every case, of course, there are always exceptions, but as a rule, I think that's been the case. So what happens is in one judicial district you may have, like say in Pulaski County, in Perry County, you may have, say, 20 judges. In other areas that may have 4 or 5 counties, you may have 2 judges. And so we're able to be flexible on that and keep things moving through our civil and criminal system pretty well.
What are some ways that you might protect victims' rights?
Well, we have the Crime Victims Office in the Attorney General's office, and one thing we try to do is we try to compensate victims of violent crimes, and also we try to do a lot of victim education type programs out there, and we work not just from the Attorney General's office but also through the various prosecutors' offices around the state. And the Attorney General really is in a network of a lot of victims' rights organizations, say issues like parents of murdered children, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, rape crisis centers around the state. And the Attorney General is part of that network to keep information flowing out, educational information flowing out, some crime prevention information flowing out. but also to let them know about the work that the Crime Victims Reparation Board does. So, what I want to try to do is just, strengthen that as much as I can, because, when I travel the state, I hear a lot of people say that we pay too much attention to criminals and not enough to crime victims, and I hear that a lot, and that is frustrating when you read the paper and you see that such and such happened and so and so's in jail, and that guy's getting 3 square meals a day and a warm bed every night, and then
Really?
he's ruined a family's life or something like that because he's taken away a family member or something like that. That is frustrating. So I think as a state, what we want to try to do is compensate the victims of crime.
If we were going to go into a little bit closer to the election day, and for many people, the name Pryor is not a new one in Arkansas. Your father, David Pryor, a former U.S. Senator. Are you going to rely heavily on that name, or do you think it could possibly hurt you and make it appear that you're a political insider?
I don't really know how people are going to perceive that, but all I can do is what I can do, and that is, hopefully by the time this airs, I will have been in all 75 counties in this state. Again, traveling the state, talking to people, not just going to courthouses, but going to coffee shops, and not just lawyers' offices, but places of business, and just trying to hit the biggest cross-section of people that I can possibly hit. Again, to talk to them about my candidacy, about the issues in the Attorney General's race, and to try to convince them, give them a reason to vote for me, and give me a chance to serve them for 4 years.
What positive things have been accomplished by Betty Dickey in her role as prosecutor?
Well, I'm not all that familiar with all of her cases that she's had there. I know that she's been a prosecutor. She was elected actually as a Democrat in Jefferson County for 2 terms, and now she's switched parties to become a Republican. But I'll let her explain, some of her positives, because I'm really not all that familiar with all the things in her office.
I'm familiar a little bit with the Attorney General's role in utility rates and with the upcoming debate on electric utility deregulation. That could be something that will be inherited by you if elected Attorney General. Could you speak to us a little bit maybe about what that will do and what your role or involvement would be, if any?
Perhaps the most significant thing that our legislature does in 1999, or I can say easily in the top 5 or 10 things it will do, the most significant things, will be, as anticipated right now, is to deregulate the electric utility industry. Right now, you don't have a choice in your electric utility. You just plug in and you pay your bill to Entergy or the co-ops or whoever it may be. After we finish deregulating, at some point, you will have a choice. You'll be able to choose your provider there in most cases. We are going from a monopoly environment to a much more free market environment. And during that transition, what I think the Attorney General's role is during that transition, I want to be there and fight for rural customers and residential customers and small business customers. And with all due respect to those other companies and other people involved in that process, because a lot of them are good corporate citizens, but with all due respect to them, they have their lawyers and they have their lobbyists. But the ratepayers, the customers in the state, they have the Attorney General. And that is something that the next Attorney General needs to spend a lot of time working through, and get in there and fight for the rights of electric customers here in Arkansas.
You mentioned you'd like to employ a sound, sensible environmental program. What would you like to see done about the Smackover area? It's had areas of standing oil since the boomtown days.
Yeah, Smackover, and not just that, but that area, that region generally, has had a long history of environmental, I hate to say problems, but they are problems. Some of those areas have been grandfathered in. Some of those areas have where there are various chemicals, et cetera, getting into groundwater, and it's a real problem. And I think all that the Attorney General can do is, get in there and look at it, and if there are reasonable things that can be done, the Attorney General needs to do them. And we need to always, of course, comply with federal law and state law. And in some cases, some of those oil fields, et cetera, have been in those brine fields. Some of those have been grandfathered in, some not. So I just want to approach the office when it comes to environmental issues as a very balanced, fair-minded, open-door kind of office. I want to have a round table where everybody can come in and have a seat at the table and talk about the issues. And if there are things that we can do that we should do, I want to try to do those things.
Speaking about federal law, if the national instant background checks on handgun purchases is not in place January 1st, would you, like Attorney General Winston Bryant, conduct background checks on handgun buyers?
Well, hopefully that will not be an issue, because everybody, almost everybody in the process is of the belief that that the instantaneous background system will be in place. In fact, the National Rifle Association has supported the instantaneous background check as part of the national law, the change in the federal law. If it's not in place at this point, I intend to continue doing what Winston Bryant has done. Under federal law, the Department of Justice in Washington designated our Attorney General's office as the office to do the background checks. To date, again at the taping of this, over 700 people in Arkansas have been denied access to handguns under the Brady Bill. And I'm not real crazy about all the aspects of the Brady Bill. I'm not crazy about the instantaneous check, the fee that will be charged. But I think if it's effective, it looks like we're starting to build a case that it is effective. I plan on continuing it.
If elected, what steps will you take to bring closure to the tobacco litigation issue?
I'll do everything in my power to bring closure to that. Under the federal proposal that is now bogged down in Congress, that and I don't want to be too partisan, but the Republicans in the Senate killed earlier this year. Under that federal proposal, that proposed settlement, Arkansas would have gained $3.2 billion. That's billion with a B. That would come back into Arkansas that we could use to fund health care programs here, to make sure low-income, elderly people and low-income people get health care, and also we could make sure that younger people, children, don't get hooked on smoking and hooked on tobacco use in early age. So, that's $3.2 billion that now we won't get. So I'm going to do whatever I can in my power to make sure that we get our fair share, of that tobacco settlement.
You mentioned earlier about the FOI, Freedom of Information Act, and recently the Ethics Commission and FOI and those things have been in the news. The Ethics Commission and sanctioning various newsmakers, and then in itself being sanctioned in the form of a lawsuit. What are your thoughts about the Ethics Commission and how it should play a role maybe with the Attorney General's office or in Arkansas government itself?
Traditionally, the Attorney General's office really performed the function of an Ethics Commission. Back in the old days before we established the Ethics Commission in 1990, really it fell on the Attorney General to be the ethical watchdog for government. I'm a supporter of the Ethics Commission. I think if anything we need to beef it up. We need to give it more teeth. We need to make our public officials and people running for office more accountable to someone, and I think the Ethics Commission is a good place to start. The problem with the Ethics Commission, as with any state agency or any appointed board or whatever the case may be, it can be political, and we need to do whatever we can do to depoliticize that office. It's too important to play politics with that, because ultimately it's a matter of public trust. And if the public doesn't have confidence in their elected officials, we can't have a democracy. So it's a very important, the Ethics Commission is a very important thing to me.
Many Arkansans are concerned with the Department of Juvenile Crime about the recent inadequate, inhumane services.
Yeah, the Division of Youth Services and the Department of Human Services and DHS is really troubling to me. There was a series in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette that ran in the early summer of 1998 that exposed a lot of problems, and you get into an issue of who knew what when and what was done and what wasn't done to correct problems, but Let me tell you, as an Attorney General, what I see there, I mean, of course, I'm troubled by any time there's an allegation of abusing children, particularly children in state custody. I mean, that's inexcusable. We can't do that. But also, I'm very troubled by the enormous legal exposure we have now as a result of some things going on in DYS. In other words, the children in the system, the parents of the children in the system can theoretically sue the state in a class action and could recover millions and millions of dollars. We have a vested interest in making sure that we do the right thing with DYS. The Attorney General is going to be the lawyer for the state when that day comes, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we don't have problems in that office.
Would there be any role that you could possibly play in assisting either the legislature in the coming session with maybe revising the juvenile offender code and looking at things like the DYS system? And what are some things that, after the shootings in Jonesboro and in Stamps, there have been some thoughts about, well, we need to reduce the age that we can try someone as an adult. We need different types of reform and punishment.
I would say that when it comes to juvenile crime, particularly violent juvenile crime, there are a number of factors that go into why kids act the way they do. And I think if you hear anybody that has a real easy solution, that's probably the wrong solution. I mean, it's complicated, it's hard, there are a lot of factors. I think what I would like to see is the legislature exercise a lot of wisdom in looking at this, and the governor and the attorney general and everybody else really exercise wisdom. We don't need any more bad law in the books. What we need to do is we need to get in there and look at this thing and equip our juvenile court system to work. In fact, in 1994, when I was in the Arkansas House, we rewrote the juvenile code, really start to finish. And the document we came up with, it wasn't perfect, and we knew it at the time, it wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better than what we had on the books before. And so juvenile crime is always going to be a hard issue. It's very emotional. It's an issue that a lot of people have ambivalence about because you want to punish these young people, particularly the violent ones. But on the other hand, we all know that children don't always understand the consequences of their actions. And I think in conclusion on that point, what I'd like to say is that there's an old maxim in the law, an old principle of law, that is hard cases make bad law. And that Jonesboro case is a hard case. And I'm concerned that if the legislature or the governor go off half-cocked, we're going to come up with some bad law. And the law's going to be counterproductive. It may sound good in the headlines, but it's not going to get the job done. I want to be part of the solution.
We're running kind of short on time here, so for such a young man, you've already tackled quite a bit in the political arena. Why is it you've decided to take such leadership roles?
Well, I don't know. Maybe something in my gene pool. Y'all, of course, know my father, David Pryor, but you may not have known that my grandmother, Susie Pryor, was the first woman to run for office in Arkansas. And my grandfather, Edgar Pryor in Camden, was sheriff of Ouachita County, as were my great-grandfather and great-great-grandfathers were both sheriffs of Ouachita County. I'm the fifth generation in my family to hold elected office. So I don't know what that is, but maybe I have a calling to public service. Maybe that's just part of the way I was brought up, that I do believe that government is there for a reason. It serves a very important function in our society, and it can do things right. And I want to be the kind of attorney general where I get in there and serve people, and that people maybe can restore a little bit of confidence in people's mind in their state government.
One word to sum up you and your campaign.
One word?
One word. Or one idea. We'll give you that.
Well, maybe competence. What I'd like to be is an attorney general that is very competent, very knowledgeable in the law, very hardworking, one that doesn't play a lot of politics, but one that really gets in there and follows the law. What I want to try to do as attorney general is let the law drive the office, not the politics, because if you let politics drive the office, you get into a bunch of crazy, nonsensical kind of decision making. I want to let the law drive the office and just get in there and work as hard as I can for the people of the state.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us at this special Campaign 98 edition of the SAU Report. I'm Lisa Stegall.
And I'm Amanda Black. Thank you.
The SAU Report is a production of broadcast journalism students in the Department of Theater and Mass Communication at Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.